Hi guys and gals and kittens, and welcome to the I Need a Magic show. So in this video I'm going to show you around Visual SQL Studio. Sorry about that. So SQL Studio is one of the menu items underneath Create here, where you can go in and you can actually visually design a database, and or you can switch to SQL View, which allows you to write SQL. And if you hold down function control and click space on a Mac or control space on Windows, you even get autocomplete on tables and stuff like that. If I now select all from roles, for instance, you will see it actually returns all the roles I have in my system here. Now, if you want to follow this video hands-on, realize what I'm going to be doing in this video. I'm going to be creating a database. I'm going to show you the migration parts and the module auto wiring up parts. And in order to do that, I'm going to need a database first. Now, if I look here now, okay, I already have a test one from before, but I'm going to be deleting that and starting from scratch. But you cannot actually create a database from inside of SQL Studio. If you want to create or connect to an existing database, you got to choose the Manage menu item, and then you got to choose the Databases menu item here. If you click this guy, you can connect to an external database. We support MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server here, to which point you need to give your connection string a name. That is just like, I don't know, my DB server, for instance, and then you need to provide a connection string. It doesn't accept hyphens, and then you need to provide a connection string. Now, typically, when you do provide a connection string, it features settings such as initial catalog. I can't remember the exact, and then this is typically CRM or something. Now, this part of your connection string needs to be replaced with database. Why? Because Magic requires meta information in order to be able to read table names and column names and stuff like that. And in order to be able to do that, it actually needs to read from the system tables of your database. Only needs to read only access for the record. And this part of your connection string is dynamically replaced as you are creating a connection towards your database. So, and you can actually see that if you open up MISC and you open up configuration, you can actually see that in the default SQLite generic database connection string. I can't show you that because there are some secrets in my configuration that I don't want to share to everybody on YouTube. Now, what you can also do, however, because Magic contains an internal SQLite data adapter. SQLite is a file-based database. Let me just delete this guy, such that we start from scratch, such that you have the same in your environment that I do. SQLite allows you to rapidly create file-based databases. It's still fairly rich in regards to SQL and stuff like that. However, it's in process. It's running on the file system on your cloudlet, and it's not as scalable or like massive typically as a MySQL database or a PostgreSQL database or an SQL Server database. So if you want to use one of these guys instead of an SQLite database, you are of course welcome to do that. I am going to be, however, just creating a new SQLite database, and I'm going to name it Demo. Great, ta-da, and I'm done. I now have an SQLite database. I can now go back to SQL Studio, right? And I can choose that database demo, and I can start visually designing my database. Now, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you've probably seen parts of this. Don't skip this video nonetheless, because in this video, I'm going to be diving much deeper into the internals of SQL Studio. However, you've probably seen me creating a customers table. Right, previously it's kind of my go-to thing. Customer underscore name, column type, text. And this is the type of column you want your particular. You said database contains of multiple tables. Each table has multiple columns, right? Column can be like email, name, address, etc. Now each column has a type. Integer basically means whole number, numeric means decimal number, timestamp means like date time or stuff like that, and text means text. Now I can provide a default value if I want to, such that if I insert into my customers database table, and I do not provide a customer name, then whatever I'm writing here in the default value thing is going to be the default value of that particular column. I'm not going to be doing that. And then you can choose whether or not you want this particular column to be able to accept nulls or not. If you remove this one and you don't insert a customer name and you don't have a default value on this particular column, then it's actually going to be throwing an exception. Then you can check off if you want to have indexes on this column or not. Typically that's smart for tables where you don't have frequent inserts and or updates, but you have a lot of data with very, very high frequency of select statements. I'm not going to do that for this particular column. I'm just going to click add. Then I'm going to create a new table. This one's I'm going to create name contacts. You see, it's automatically populating the primary key name. And it's automatically by default using an auto increment. I could use a varchar if I wanted to, but probably for 98% of your tables, you want to have an auto increment integer value as your primary key. SQL Studio does not allow you to create a table without primary key, for the record. So now I have two tables. Now I want to create a one-to-many relationship because each customer can have multiple contacts. A customer is kind of like a company, right? So therefore, I'm going to be creating a foreign key from contacts into customers. This creates what's commonly referred to as referential integrity, meaning I cannot have a contact in my database without it belonging to a customer, if you wish. So customers is kind of like a bag of contacts, and no contact can exist unless it is associated with a customer, unless I apply nullable here. If I apply cascade here, I can delete the customer and automatically every single contact associated with that customer will be deleted. I'm not going to do that for this guy. I'm just going to click add, and I now have a referential integrity from contacts into customer. Now I can create a field for contacts, name, okay, text, and then I can create another field called email. Okay, text. So now I have a microscopic minimalistic database. Name and email allows for nullable. That was probably a mistake. Okay, so let's recreate that. You can click the trash can here to delete columns from your database. And then I can do name again. Choose text and remove the nullable checkbox, at which point you will see the tiny here disappeared, implying it cannot be null. So here we go. I now have two microscopic tables, one table with a name and an email column, another table with a customer name column, each contacts belonging to that customer. Now let's say I want to create a reusable module. I want to create my module. I want to name it demo. Okay, what I can now do, you see, if I now open up Hyper IDE here now in a different browser window, and I go to Hyper IDE and I expand my modules folder, well, I kind of like have somebody here from my previous YouTube video, so let me just delete these guys, delete, and delete. So now my modules folder is empty, right? You agree there are no folders inside of my modules folder. If I now go back here now and I click this guy and I click database DDL. DDL is one of those acronyms we software developer happens to love. It means data definition language, and it's typically used for describing the structure of a database. If I now click this guy, I'm getting a bunch of SQL here, SQL. This point I can click export to module. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, maybe I'm creating a module on my own development machine that I want to deploy into production, at which point, obviously, my module depends upon this particular database structure in order to function. Now, what I just did now is that I created a new module, actually, which is named demo, that has a magic.startup file that contains the SQL required to create my database. Create table customers, create table contacts. And then it contains one hyperlambda file that just simply invokes a slot that ensures that it executes that SQLite script to create my database. Now let's say I deploy the app into production, and 3 months later I want to modify the app and I want to create an additional column. Let's say I want to provide for my customers org underscore no. And then I want to do this as a text field. Now, if I just click create on this column, then I get different differences between my development database schema or database structure and my production database structure. So what I can do now before I create this column, I can choose these three icons here in the top right corner. I can click Auto Migrate, and then I can create my org no column, at which point, when it's done creating my org no column, it's going to come back and ask me, hey man, do you want to add this as a migrate script to your module? At which point, if I now click yes here or create, and if I refresh here now, you will see I have an additional folder inside of my demo modules, inside of Magic Startup, called DB Migration SQLite. And here you see 001 migration script SQL. Alter table, customers, add column, org no text. So this makes it very easy for me to actually continue working and upgrading existing modules I have created, right, by using this little feature here, auto migrate. And then of course, clear server cache. If I now, for instance, go into SQL View and I use OpenAI to create CRM, DDL for SQLite, blah, 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 and I execute that, then obviously my database schema has actually changed, but Magic actually doesn't know that. So in order for Magic to actually be able to fetch the database tables and the columns and stuff like that, you need to clear server cache here in the top right corner. 3 dots here. And now we are in SQL View. Now I can do select all from function control space on the Mac, control space on the Windows, customers, F5 or function F5 on Mac. And as you can see, we don't have any data in this particular database. However, now I can do insert into customers, customer name, values, Acme Inc. Right, and now if I do the same, I do Control Z to undo, and I come back to select all from customers. You will see I have one record here now. Now I can export any SQL statement you create inside of SQL Studio in SQL View. You can export it as a CSV file, allowing you to easily extract data from your database. And this is true for MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, in addition to obviously, of course, SQLite, allowing you to create statistics and export it to Excel, etc., etc. If you have a frequent snippet you are using very often, you can click the Save button here and call it whatever you want, my snippet. Now, if I refresh, I come back 3 months later and I want to re-execute this exact same SQL. I go to SQL View, I choose snippets, and here you can see my snippets. So this allows me to have like administration snippets that I frequently use. Let's say my manager asks me for like an extraction from some sort of like database once a month to create his, I don't know, CFO report or whatever in Excel to show to the shareholders of the company. Okay, cool, I can save that snippet. Every time a manager comes to me and asks me about the last month's data, I go in, I load the snippet, I execute it, and I export it as a CSV file and send it to my manager. Safe mode here is kind of important. You see, if you have a database with millions of records and you do select all from customers, that's going to take like a day to execute. And in fact, it's not probably even going to execute. It's simply going to both crash your cloudlet and crash your browser. Why? Because returning 1 million records from your backend is not safe. It's going to exhaust the memory of your server, and it's going to exhaust, even if it doesn't do that, it's going to exhaust the memory of your browser client because it creates a table with every single record. Right, so safe mode implies it will only select 200 records. You can actually see that in action. If I now do select all from log, let's see if I have more than 200 items here. I'm not entirely sure. Yes, as you can see, first 200, if you watch very carefully here now, first 200 records returned. Turn off safe mode. Let's do it once more. First 200 records returned. Turn off safe mode to return all records. Now, in this particular database, I can probably turn off safe mode, at which point it's going to be returning some few thousand records, 354. But if it returned hundreds of thousands of records or tens of thousands of records, my server would crash. So be careful with safe mode. Then I can also choose import, right? At which point I'm asked to browse for an SQL file on my machine, and I can upload that SQL file into here. You can probably just open it in Notepad and copy and paste it in here too, but anyways, we do have an import button here. And then short keys, keyboard shortcuts. So now, interestingly, when I'm done creating my demo database, this isn't really part of SQL Studio, but I still want to show it to illustrate the power of what you can do with Magic. You can actually go to create, you can go to endpoint generator, and choose that particular database, demo, you can configure one table at a time. I'm going to be creating a YouTube video where I go deep into the endpoint generator in later videos. However, I just wanted to rapidly show you, click the generate endpoints, and ta-da, 454 lines of code automatically generated for me. These are put automatically by default inside of the demo folder in my modules folder. So now I, for instance, have, if I now execute customers get, I click customers.get.hl and I give focus to the code mirror editor. I click F5. Ta-da! I'm asked for like parameters for my endpoint. I'm not going to provide anybody any parameters. I'm just going to return everything as is. Now it asks, it returns customer ID, customer name, and org.no, and I can even insert customers post here, hopefully. Let's give it a name, Howdy Foo Bar Inc. Right, org.no, blah, 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 blah. Right, now if I go back to this endpoint and I execute that guy, and then you will see I have 2 records in my database here now. Now when I'm done, yet again, there's going to be additional videos in later YouTube videos illustrating this more down into details, but I still want to show this. I mark demo, make sure that is my active folder, click download folder, ta-da, and I can move that folder into production or between cloudlets any ways I see fit. Now if I delete this folder, just illustrate that, I delete it. Then I go to my database. I delete the database to demo. And I go back into HyperID. And let me just illustrate one point. If I now go to SQL Studio, you will see I don't have a demo database anymore, right? Now, however, if I go to HyperID and if I click this guy, which is for installing modules, and I browse to the file I just downloaded, which is basically the folder demo, expand demo here, you will see every single file now followed me, including the DB migrations and everything. If I now go to SQL Studio, I have a demo database. And why didn't I? Let me see, clear server cache maybe. And there's my demo database. Now I don't have the data for the database, so if I go into SQL View and I select all from customers, I don't have the data, but I have the structure, right? If you want to do the data, you need to do additional steps besides this part. So this allows me to take one module that I develop in my development environment, move it into production, and have the entirety of the data structure required to actually execute and run that module automatically created for me, including the migration scripts inside of my production environment. So anyways, and yes, of course, everything has AI. I mean, AI is horizontally integrated into every single component of Magic. So if I now tell OpenAI, create an SQLite DDL for me for a CRM system with 5 tables. Right, hopefully this is going to work. I can't remember if I configured my OpenAI API key for this particular cloudlet or not, but it seems like it might be working. So let's see what it comes up with. And there you go. Unfortunately, it seems to sometimes it adds additional text besides the bare minimum of the SQL. So let's just remove that guy. Users, activities, sales, contacts, and customers. Okay, all copy, table view. Let's just delete this table. Contacts. Let's just delete this table. Customers. Let's go back into SQL view. I have the DDL on my clipboard. Click F5. SQL successfully executed. Now let's empty our cache and go back into table view, at which point you will see we now have 5 tables in our demo database. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.